enough, that's how I know that the start of the thing, I need to cut out about 10 seconds, and the 10 seconds is me complaining about how bad transcription is. Every single time I do it.
In case the AI gets you.
Yeah. But it's also, no, it's because my accent and my stutter, when it transcribes, it distracts my brain because I'm constantly checking whether or not it's heard me correctly. And I'm like, you will hear me correctly. I don't give a damn about the transcription. And I'll share my screen because that's also a really good way of knowing that I'm looking at the right thing. Oh, I've also got a problem with Teams. I'm sharing my whole screen. If you see something you shouldn't, we'll just pretend we didn't, and I'll block it out. I've turned off all the notifications, I think. Just let me just take 2 seconds to double check that my notifications are off. There we are. Right. So what we're going to do, we'll do our standard welcome. I know there's only 4 of us and we all know each other, but it works really well on the recording so that people know who people are when people are coming through. If this is their first time coming into one of these meetings, it means people know who people are. I'll quickly run through what we're doing, and we're going to go through the data quality stuff that I'm thinking about. And Tim, your ideas and thoughts of where we're going is really important, because I'm trying to pull everything together into fixing a lot of the data quality issues in a simplistic way, in a simple way, not a simplistic way, in a simple way. I'll bring up the list, because that way I can order it. I'll go from the top down. So go me, BB, Elise, and Tim. Right. I'm Dr. J, use they as a pronoun. I'm the service owner for NaPTAN. I'm a consultant from ThoughtWorks, and my favourite train journey still has to be the Eurostar from London to Amsterdam, because I did that for about 2-3 months just before the start of lockdown. I actually caught the last train out of Amsterdam, or the last train back out of Amsterdam before it fully locked down. There was nothing like the stress of that day. And that was almost, I won't say that was my favourite train journey, the very last one, because of the stress of it, but it was actually such a lovely train journey to take on a Sunday after. I'd take it on a Sunday afternoon and a Thursday evening, and that was kind of the travel part of my work week. So I would start on I'd work Monday morning to Thursday at the client, and then I'd work in Friday in the ThoughtWorks offices with the rest of the team, and everyone else was flying and had to deal with flights and storms and that, and I just sat on a train and people bought me nice stuff, because trains at Eurostar at the time, when it was Eurostar and not Thales, was wonderful. And there are other train operators that you could also travel and have a lovely time on. So, BB, I'll hand it over to you.
Hi everybody. Thanks, Jay. My name is BB. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the product owner for NaPTAN at DFT. And my favourite train journey, I've been on a lot of trains. I'm thinking one of the most fun ones was, and this can be very vague, was a train. I think it was a steam train. I think they call it the Harry Potter train, but it's in Scotland near Ben Nevis. That was cool. I actually liked the train itself. I enjoyed that. That was fun. Thank you.
Brilliant. Elise, you're the next one up.
Hi, I'm Elise. I go by she and her. I work for North Northamptonshire Council as their senior public transport officer, so I am responsible for all things buses and rail. It's nice to hear, Booby, that you're getting into trains. Always a fan of that. My favourite train journey, though, was the train we took from Toronto all the way over to Banff. It was the Rocky Mountaineer, but we didn't go through the Rockies. We actually got off in Jasper, not Banff, because we were going up to Banff and then down to Calgary to visit my uncle who lives there and all my relatives there. So we had basically took, I think it was about 4 days from Toronto straight across the plains all the way over to Jasper before we had a few days in Banff and then a few days in Calgary before heading back to Niagara for a week. So that still is my favourite because Canada is my all-time favourite location.
Canada is lovely. The bits that I've seen of it are incredibly beautiful. Tim, you're the next one up.
Yeah, so I'm Tim Rivet. I go by he, him. I wear various hats. For this one's probably combination of subject matter expert for the DFT on public transport data standards and a bit of running Arctic, which does good practice and technical standards and things like that for people interested in public transport technology. My favourite train journey was going to be the same line as BB, the Fort William to Mallaig, but not for the Harry Potter bit because I don't like the viaduct.
I know. I like the train and the actual journey itself and everything. I didn't really understand the Harry Potter thingy-majig. I get it from the films, but still. But yeah. I really like it.
So you having chosen that, I'll go for a bit earlier in the journey when it's going across Rannochmoor, in the middle of nowhere, and there's a station that's 2 miles from any bit of tarmac road.
Another one. So this is one of the rail replacement bus stations that we know about.
Yeah, you'll have fun with that one.
That don't actually have rail replacements, or if they do, they're so far away. Yeah. You just if you're rail replacing this, don't attempt to travel here. There's one that's basically says there are no rail replacement buses to this stop. If the stop isn't working, hop off at the one beforehand and walk the 3 miles to get to here, which I think is also particularly succinct from National Rail. On the steam trains, we used to when I was a kid, Glenbrook is a place in New Zealand that has a steam train, and you could go and see the steam train on the weekend, and that we could never afford to go on it. So one of the things of this year is I've decided I will go and find a steam train to travel on. I've been on all the little kids trains around parks and things like that, but one of my goals this year is to find a steam train that's a nice day trip from London to go on a steam train and come back. So if anyone's got any ideas, send them through, because I'll definitely do that. Sorry, I've got hay fever, so my throat is going to go in and out. Brilliant. So plan for today, just very, very quickly, seeing previous meetings. We all know this stuff, but I just do it at the start of the YouTube for everybody. The NaPTAN site, the documentation for NaPTAN, what I'm doing and BB's helping with is we're grabbing all of the information that's spread across multiple parts of DFT and Gov sites and everything and bringing them into one place, because we've got competing documentation that clashes in its advice. We've got, Tim pointed out that one thing says we don't have a schema for this. I didn't know that 2.5.1 had actually been released, because I'd only ever found 2.5.067. Which was not an official released version. So we've now got something we can put out to say, hey, there is a super new version, but we're never going to go to it because of other reasons. I don't believe. I think we're more likely to move to a NetX solution than move to that 2.5 because of A+ NaPTAN and stuff. So it's pulling all the information about NaPTAN onto that NaPTAN site, onto that additional information page. So we've consistently got control of it. We know where it all is, and it can be easily updated. And for the rest of today, we're focusing on data quality. I've got a spinning wheel of doom. I'm hoping it's not impacting my internet with yous all. No, I can see BB moving, so therefore it's all fine. I'm going to talk about the why of data quality, what we're doing now, next, later, and even later. So you've got an idea of the stuff that we're stacking up and analysing and thinking about. And then we've got a little corner for feedback. So Muriel is sent to try me today. So data quality, I tried to draw this out a little bit just to explain why data quality is so important. So we've got Beryl traveling to see Beverly, and this is her first time making the trip to Beverly by public transport. We've got Beverly, who's lived in the area for a long time, and she wants to tell Beryl the stop to use very, very easily. Come and use the stop, or here's my postcode. There's 3 stops to choose from around me. So it's kind of that combination of somebody new coming into the area for the first time and somebody who's lived in the area, who knows it well, who knows the situations. We're having to balance both of their needs when we describe a stop, when we use data to talk about stops and build our journey planners and our route planners and all of that. Just to make sure that everyone's on the same page, there are 3 very, very key pieces of information about a bus stop. There's a common name, and that tells you the name of the stop, e.g. post office. There's the locality that tells me the where of the stop, e.g. weekly, because you need to know which post office it is. And there's the indicator, which tells me which of the 2 bus stops that I want. And one of the interesting things that came out of one of the indicator meetings at the end of last year was this notion of, instead of using opposite and adjacent and besides and all of those things, of just starting to use A and B to describe the 2 stops. It's nice and universal. It gives us this stop is A, this stop is B, as long as your stop has your stops have the ability to put an indicator on the stop. To make it very clear which one is which, because there was a lot of discussion about opposite, adjacent, next to, etc. This is a proposal that we're going to sit and talk more about. We're going to think more about how it will make indicators work, whether it's better, whether it's less good. Elise, I know that you were part of that group, and we'll do a lot more around it. But it's kind of thinking about using what came up from that meeting and how people approached it to go, actually, is this a slightly more passenger friendly way of explaining which stop is which to people, and helping clean up the 12,000 variations of indicator down into something that's a little bit more manageable and a little bit more programmatically useful. So those are the things, and they're put in by local authorities, and they're used by your bus operators and your journey planners. And I just put a couple of personas here. John, who does it all, is our representative of a local transport authority person. As John, who does it all for an ally for NaPTAN, I want to provide high quality data and putting my time into the right fields so that I'm maximising the results for passengers of my work on NaPTAN. So that's kind of what I believe is the goal of the local authority people. They want to put stuff in the right fields and maximise their time. Neil, who is depots, is kind of representative of our bus operators. As Neil, who plans routes for a large bus company, I want to be able to easily select the right stops for my routes so that I publish accurate routes for my passengers. We know that this is something that all bus operators want, and we can tell when this is going wrong when they're adjusting the bus stops within their trans exchange, where the local authority and published version in NaPTAN and the version within trans exchange are different, and those are the ones that we want to start pulling out and talking to people about as to why they're different. Are they different in location? Are they different in naming, and what's going on there? And then we've got our journey planners. I've used Mike and Amy as an example. As Mike and Amy running Travelline, I want to be able to easily search routes and stops from the passenger inputs so they can accurately direct passengers to the best route to take between places. So this is ensuring that we're giving all the right metadata around a stop and around a route so that it's easy to plan from and to. Because if we don't give people the right metadata, things can go a little bit wrong. And then I love the way that I got to put myself in as a user here. As a service owner of NaPTAN at DFT, I want to ensure that the NaPTAN data we publish is of the best quality so that the data consumers trust in NaPTAN data. So it's the data coming in. I trust the local authorities. I can work with them to improve it if we need to and to identify it, but it's ensuring that it's of the highest quality when we publish it. Now, one of the questions that often comes up is that in part of the migration, we took out, I think it was 132, it might have been 136 business rules from all the various systems. There were some that were put in by EtoWorld, there were some that were within a validation checker within NaPTAN, there were some that were just applied, seemed to be applied randomly by people in different systems. And I'm also aware that some people's local software still runs on these business rules, even if we don't anymore. We examined them all and we threw them all away because they conflicted, they didn't make sense, and they didn't help build the data quality. They were trying to help to build the data quality, but sometimes the way that they did it meant put a lot of extra work on the local authorities. For example, when you had a look at some of the stops, people were having to go and consistently suppress the same business rule every single time when the business rules were reset and reapplied, because yes, the stop on the South Bank on Waterloo Bridge is too close to the water because it's literally on the stop is literally on the Thames, but it's on the Thames on a bridge above the Thames, and it just would consistently trigger that warning. So this was looking at those and going, what is the use of triggering these warnings? So we turned them all off. We've not seen a real drop in data quality within NaPTAN, but what we're now trying to do is look at what does data quality mean? What are the fields that are being consistent, complete, and accurate? What does that mean across the entirety of the NaPTAN data set? So as part of that, this is going to kill me if this happens every single time. We've got a couple of things that we're bringing in now, and we've got non-passenger stops, which I'll run through in a minute. And then we've also got stops that we know we have some real data quality issues on, and we've basically said these fields are determined as we should not use. And I'll explain why we shouldn't use them. Because it's inconsistent across all of the local transport authorities. And it's inconsistent because for modification, this has been inconsistently applied by software across the entire set of local authorities. We know that some people were updating and during one of the calls, somebody updated a stop and quickly printed out their NaPTAN and went and checked if the modification number had incremented, or the revision. Sorry, I've jumped one. Modification. This is next to what is it? What's the field? There's a field that's active and inactive. Status, next to status, and then there's a modification. Now, modification was new, revised, pending, suspended. There was various options. What we found was that everyone's software was applying this differently. For example, London, everything is new, even if it's been modified 700 times. They have no other statuses. Other people's statuses were updating or not, depending on how the software felt that day. And it is changed by the software and the software version and whether or not they migrated in or out of particular softwares. So this was kind of one of the things of even Andy Hole's, even the local authorities that Andy Hole looks after had variations in how they were using the modifications, and that's because of when they migrated in and where they migrated from. So it's just like modification is just not usable because either everyone's got to go back and consistently apply it, which is ridiculous across 400,000 stops, or we just say modifications are dud. We just stop using it, and we will start suppressing it. We will start being like the notes field and suppress it in the output eventually. That's kind of where we're aiming to, but we just want to give people an alert of not using it, and eventually we will suppress it so it'll be empty. Revision number is the same. We did some testing live on a call. Somebody went and made some changes to a couple of stops and printed it out, and the revision numbers didn't consistently work. And it's just like, that just means that it's not something that we can rely on as a data consumer to use the data. So what we're also going to do is just say don't use it, and we're also going to suppress it, because what we don't want people to do is the stuff that I've done over the last some time, trying to figure out what the pattern is behind these fields and figure out what they could be used for and what could be fixed. Is it small things that could be fixed by one or two local authorities, or is it a larger systemic problem? These two have a very much a larger systemic problem. Tim, you've got a question. You're probably going to tell me I can't suppress it completely.
Well, no, I mean, at the moment, yeah, they're not being used properly and things like that, but I think we need to reserve the right to bring them back, because at the moment there's not that many changes that are happening. But if some of the discussions that are going on politically at the moment occur, then there will be more updates, around accessibility and the assets and things like that.
Yeah.
And at that point, people that are consuming the data, it's going to be much more important for them to understand when something's changed, and it's how they know that they need to reprocess that stop data, which may be more complicated process than it is now.
We're not changing modification date. We're just changing the modification. So we're suppressing the modification field and the revision number field, because no software is consistently applying these. Yeah. It's completely inconsistent. So therefore, we've either got to ask Elise to go back and redo all of their stops to a particular standard, or we say we work from modification date. We know modification date works, but we know that modification and revision number don't. So it's kind of finding the fields that are inconsistently applied and just saying, hey, don't worry about these. At least your systems will put these in or not, depending on, actually everyone's systems put these in because they're mandatory fields. It's just they're inconsistently putting them in, and they're inconsistently applying rules. So either we need to change everybody's software, or we just say, hey, these fields, we're just making them, we're going to make them, don't use them, and we will eventually just make them quiet, because that's going to reduce the noise that you're presented with as a data consumer, because that's kind of what I'm focusing on, is reducing the noise to the data consumer in some ways. And the last one is clear down code, where the technology is no longer used. And there's a few people who've got some data, and they're very, very few. And it's just like, let's just be very clear that this data is not being used, and so as a data consumer, remember, this is as a data consumer, you're just aware that you don't use these three fields for any of your analysis or any of your work, because they're not consistent across all of the local authorities. You might find your local authority, if you're just working with one, is fine, but if you then try to join up across neighbouring local authorities, it will probably not work. So we're wanting to highlight that so that people aren't doing a lot of work and running into what is effectively a systemic data quality problem. Does that make sense, Tim?
Oh, clear down. I'm totally in favour of getting rid of, because it's based on outdated tech. So yeah.
When did the outdated tech? I thought it was about 2010.
So I say outdated tech. There's one or two systems that still actually use it out there, but they're not populating it in NaPTAN. But it's, buses talking direct to bus stops, which doesn't happen anymore in any system that's had a significant update in the last 10 years. So yeah, I mean, it's not needed anymore. Clear down code.
Yeah. So what we also want to do is, by suppressing it and by letting people know that they shouldn't use it, and then by suppressing it and removing them from the output, it reduces the amount of data that we're publishing, which reduces our amount of CO2. It might only be by a little bit, but every little bit counts. Every little bit that we put out, every time that we can reduce the size of the file, it's gonna help people. So I'm just quickly going to go and focus on the non-passenger stops. So these are, and I'll scroll up to the top, these are stops that are not in the NaPTAN data set. And there are two types of stops that are needed to schedule services that will not serve passengers. There's bus depots and there's driver rests. Now, bus depots are where drivers collect their buses, and there is a dead time on published schedules which needs to account for the time for the bus to go from the depot to the first stop. So what is happening is the drivers, the bus and the scheduling is not showing on the real-time information until the driver's at the first stop and logs in, because there's no dead time. Whereas if we can get them so they can log in at the depot and we can account for that dead time, people know that the bus is going to arrive when it, rather than knowing the bus has arrived when it finally draws up and it then appears on the schedules. So it's just resolving that small head and tail problem. So we need to put bus depots in. The other one is drivers rest for coaches. So coaches are based on drivers' hours and not scheduled hours. Driving long distance requires breaks. These are scheduled at motorway rest stations and similar. Passengers cannot alight or disembark at these stops. They will continue their journey. So it's not truly a passenger access node. We still need to have them in the schedules so that coaches can show that adherence to schedule and plan in those breaks and plan the journey between those stops.
It's not just coaches, Dr. J, it's buses as well. So there are places where a bus will stop that's not a depot to do a driver change midway through a route, sometimes after the end of a route when they've got to go from the end of one route to the start of another. Where they're changing service, where it's going from one service to another, the end point and the start point might not align, and sometimes they'll have a rest break partway along that bit of route. So there's a reasonable number of use cases for these sort of stops.
So I will add that in. The main one that we were focusing on that came from BODS was around the coach drivers rest.
Absolutely.
That we needed to account for. I think the driver bus changes will be under the bus depot-y type things. The way that you describe them, they're kind of those stops before the start of a journey. But I do know
these are on a public journey with passengers in, where they will always stop because there's a driver change.
Yeah. So I will note that down under the bus depots / driver changes. I'll put them in that way round. Just so I wanted to keep that separated so that there's the bus ones and the coach ones are just ever so slightly separate because they're slightly different audiences. I'll make that change before I go to ARTIG. And then there's also the international passenger stops. NaPTAN supports England, Scotland and Wales only. No other geographies are held in the NaPTAN dataset. We don't hold, what's the little island in the middle of the, between England and Ireland? That's
Isle of Man.
Isle of Man.
Got Guernsey and Jersey, the Channel Islands that use NaPTAN. You've got Northern Ireland, which uses it as well.
Yeah, but we have agreed that NaPTAN has stops for England, Scotland and Wales only that we hold and publish in the NaPTAN here from DFT. The other, they may use the standards. They are not put into our data set and published as part of NaPTAN. So for stops outside of NaPTAN's geography, coaches can be international and the schedules need to have stops that are outside their geographical boundaries. These stops use NetX or NaPTAN numbers of the locations they serve. This will show passengers, clearly allow passengers to plan their journey. This will stop us having the Gare du Nord or a coach stop in Calais that's got a locality of Dover, because their localities are often listed incorrectly, and the all of the stops internationally have their own NaPTAN and NetX numbers that people can put into their trans exchange and should be putting into their trans exchange, that it's calling it this stop. It's calling it this stop in France, and because France has all of their stops with NetX numbers or ACCO code style, so they can use those ACCO codes. And non-passenger stops are not appropriate for these stops because they're actually passenger stops outside of NaPTAN's geography. So that is what we're just trying to say to people: don't use a 999 code for this. Use the actual ACCO code of your stop. And what came up on Tuesday, which I thought was a really, really nice one, one of the worries of everyone was a clash between operators of two operators share a depot, and they put in a 999 number, which they're allowed to create themselves, and you end up with a clash of numbers or two people trying to use the same number. And talking it through with everybody, everyone just said 999 plus the NOC code plus whatever somebody wants to use, because it's a ACCO code, it's an alphanumeric. It just means that first we'll create their depots and can manage their numbers quite easily, and we shouldn't have a clash between the first depots and the Arriva depots, because they're not going to try to use 9990001, which is what everyone's going to try to do. We put in a NOC code that just allows that separation very, very, very easily. It's nice and relaxed. It's not formal. It's a recommendation. Because we are not going to hold these stops in NaPTAN. These stops are set up by bus operators, and they are then suppressed by journey planners. If you see a 999 stop, you know that it's not going to be a passenger stop. You just don't show it to your passengers because it's a non-passenger stop. It's very clearly indicated. You're not having to do extra work of reading the common name or anything like that, because that was of how some people were solving it by doing such and such depot, no joining or alighting or something like that. It's like, no, if you've got a 999 stop, you know that it's a stop that you can publish in your trans exchange to keep your adherence to schedules, but we also are very, very clear that it's not for passengers. So the questions that we ask, and Elise, this is what I'm expecting you would ask: can I tell a bus operator that a non-passenger stop should not be in my local authority's NaPTAN? Yes, you can. What support do I need to provide to a bus operator for non-passenger stops? Just tell them to create a number with their NOC code and then number it themselves. And what support do I need to provide to a coach operator for non-passenger stops? Exactly the same. It's just letting them know, if you need a non-passenger stop, and here's the description of it, and we'll make this very, very clear on the site. Here's the description of a non-passenger stop. Here's how you set it up, and you just put that into your system, and then we will work with BODs to ensure that these don't flag up, because they're expected non-NaPTAN stops, and being 999, if they're using the 999 code, it's all completely fine. For our small bus operators, do I have to use NaPTAN to create my schedules? You should be anyway. How do I include a stop that is in Europe? You go find the stop number for that European stop and put it in, because they've all got something similar to an ACCO code. And how do I include a driver's rest break stop? We use a 999 code to put it in. And the other ones were around how do I compare a depot so I can compare to the schedules in the AVL? We use the 999 stops, and it should be from a 999 stop. How do I include a driver's rest? Exactly the same. International stops should be brought in as international stops with their ACCO codes. And what happens if two stops have the same 999 code in different places? This, I think, we've solved by having that NOC code in, so that we can't have two people putting the same number for a different stop. If they do, they're managed by a bus operator, the bus operator can just be asked to renumber one of them. They're very, very simple to they should be very simple to renumber. Why are we doing this? Because nothing existed. It's for public services only. one of the requirements of bringing NCDS into BODs was representing two types of stops within NaPTAN, the rest break stops and the international stops. While discussing this needs with the bus coach industry, the needs for having bus depots was also raised, and the proposed solution of 999 stops is to bring all the solutions that are being applied across the ecosystem into one specific type of solution, so that we're not having people do 4 or 5 different solutions, or 148, which often happens. Within NCDS, there were 2 solutions. There's a whole pile of 900 stops, which we need to move to either 999 stops or NaPTAN stops. That's a small problem of just going back and getting them to put them on the right stops. The AN stops are in Northern Ireland, and I need to update, as far as I understand, those are the Dublin stops. Is that right, or have I got in the wrong part of Ireland and they're the Belfast stops?
Wrong part of Ireland, Belfast. You get kneecapped for that.
I hate to say it, being an O'Connor, I should know the difference, but I really am having a word problem, a brain remembering word problem today. And we've already got some 999 stops, because when I even floated this past bus operators, some of them leapt at the chance to create them, and created them before we'd even finished thinking about what they needed to do. And some of those are international stops, some of those are drivers' rests. So one of the things of this is going back to, is just pushing out, this is how they need to be used, this is how you need to use them. And then in about 6 months' time, we'll redo this analysis and talk to people who just haven't picked up on the message and have some one-to-one conversations. But we're going to just spread it widely first via RTIG, OPDI, Gavin's group, which I can never CPT, and these meetings as well. So there's a lot of public communication. This is our comms plan. I've got to do a little bit more on updating the site, updating the pages on the website, just to make this a little bit clearer. We're putting it out in the newsletter. We're doing these public meetings, which is all the different public meetings, as well as the travel line meetings, and then we'll implement any changes that are needed. For us, this is no change for NaPTAN, but this is a change for the rest of the system. And just really simply, the process: a bus or coach operator creates a stop, they publish their TransExchange file. Anyone who uses the TransExchange file can clearly see what are non-passenger stops. If they're publishing any schedules, they suppress those non-passenger stops, and anyone who's analysing the TransExchange file is going to have slightly better matching between their AVL and their schedules, because their schedules are allowing for those stops that are non-passenger stops. That's kind of the entirety of the service.
Yeah, we will need to produce some guidance for operators on what data they need to provide in the TransExchange, and also, I guess, in NetX for fares.
It's
so that it's usable by downstream systems.
Do they need to put it into NetX for fares, or so is it
fares the fares files have the route in,
right?
Because fares are route dependent, so they've got the stop, so they will need to put some data in there just for downstream systems to process, because they're important. Whilst they're not for public consumption, for operational systems like real-time systems, for example, or some of the operational management stuff that operators use, they'll need a location at least. So I'll put together what I think those systems need as a minimum, and
you and I can just check. So effectively, all I'm saying is, instead of using a NaPTAN ATCO code, you switch it to your own version of an ATCO code. Everything else about the stop stays exactly the same, because people are already trying to do this with insert many different variations here, and this is just a way of corralling them all into one place.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So those are kind of the two big ones for now. For next, being planned is the stricter text validation. Now, this came up. We ran through this a couple of meetings ago. All of the text, there are multiple text fields in NaPTAN, but there's only 3 of them that have a validator for the characters that are entered. So what we're doing is we're turning on slightly stricter text validation that's going to be across all text, all free text fields on NaPTAN, because this will stop the problem where, not to pick on Wales, but where Wales has entered a character and on its conversion into ANSI 8 plain text, it has ended up slightly garbled, and those are glitching out some people's files. What we're doing is we're just turning on text validation across all of the fields. We'll be very clear which characters are in and which characters are out, because we're taking that additional list and applying that as well. But we are allowing pipes, forward slashes and backward slashes, whichever way around they go, because we know that there are a lot of local authorities that are using those as separators within their common names. So we're leaving those in because it didn't make sense to get everyone to redo all of their common names to bring in slightly stricter text validation. We can choose which characters we apply across all of the text fields. So if we're leaving pipes in, they're left in across everywhere. If we're leaving slashes in, they're left in across everywhere. So it's very consistent with every field. At the moment, it's not consistent. You can have things in one field that you can't have in another because of the way the validation's applied. So that's the stuff that we're planning, and we'll bring that in sometime in the first half of this year, probably in the later first half of this year. And then being researched currently is town and suburb, and also from the other meeting. Just give me 2 seconds. I will run to the other meeting. Did my Chrome just crash? Oh yes, it did. Okay, bear with me. I'm just going to stop sharing and I'll bring my Chrome back up. Welcome to my life at the moment, where my Chrome will just randomly crash for no reason. If anyone knows why that's happening, please get in touch, because it is driving me insane.
You're a Mac user, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah, the latest macOS updates caused a problem with Chrome, and
Yep.
Google and Apple are arguing whose fault it is.
And I'm sitting here crying because every
You're not the only one.
Oh, I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. Just give me 2 seconds to grab. I'm just grabbing some information from the other public meeting, which I want to bring across, because Tim, I think you'd be really interested in what we came through with. I'll just bring that across and put that in here. I didn't bring all of them across because that would be way too much like having town suburb. Excellent. Just let me run. Just give me 2 seconds to sort this out, and then we'll be back. And I will possibly get rid of this. I'm not sure. Right. Right, share screen again. And I'm just going to share my whole screen because it seems to be slightly less cranky with Chrome. So the stuff that I'm starting to research, and this is looking, because in the much later, even later, what should we look into? The GAZ has been put on there. We want to look into the gazetteer eventually, because this came up from the previous, from the other meeting, but that is a very much a long-term thing of looking into the gazetteer and how it's used. But looking at the NaPTAN data, the things that we wanted to start to look into is some people are filling out town suburb crossing landmark, default wait time, those top 4, which are also part of the locality, and it's like, how are people defining them? How are people describing them? How are people using them? There's a lot of inconsistency across local authorities, and what we're trying to do is just start the conversation as to which of these are being used, which aren't. We know that a lot of people put a lot of work into Landmark, and Landmark we cannot find being used by any of the journey planners, and we want to talk to the journey planners about why they're not using it. Could it ever be useful? What would they need for it to be useful? And how are we looking at this? Because Landmark in London is quite fun, but Landmark outside of, in some places, is just a local church, which may or may not be of historic interest and things like this. So it's kind of like, how do we define that? So that is one area that we're looking at. And then the other one that came up, which is route dependent, not stop dependent, is the default wait time and timing status, because a primary timing point on one route will not be a primary timing point on all routes. And so holding this information in NaPTAN is providing some weird complications for people. Again, do we look at it? Do we suppress it? Do we tell people just not to use it, and start to look at whether or not it's needed? And then there was interesting things around bus stop type. This was much more about the CSV file output not containing the length of a Halen ride. The start and end of a Halen ride, it only contains the start of a Halen ride. And this led on to a whole discussion around what the purpose of the CSV files were originally, what they're being used for now, why we only have the stop one, and what we actually want is some kind of nice reporting that allows us to pull down the information that we need to run the reports that we need to manage our stops. Having a CSV file is one way of doing that, and I want to sit down and really have a look at what is a better solution. One of the things that Haraj, Hannah, and I pulled out at one point was using, I think it was Microsoft Business Intelligence to have a look across NaPTAN, and we set that up. But then we discovered it can only be used, and the licensing that we've got can only be used by DFT people. And what that meant was we could actually run some really nice, quick and easy reporting. And the team now has all of NaPTAN into some really nice big query tables, and we can run even better reporting. How do we get that reporting into people's hands? Because there's using the stop CSV file to do those reporting is not the easiest way of doing it. You've got to do 4 or 5 steps. We could give you a decent reporting interface. Do we go and have a look at that? And this is all stuff that I'm trying to research to bring to BB and Catherine to go, and the SRO board to go. These are the needs from everyone from the ecosystem. This is what we need to do, because the CSV files were not the best way of doing reporting, but they were the only way of doing reporting when they were the only solution. So it's kind of sitting down and going, what do you actually want from them? And I know people are wedded to CSV files because everyone goes, oh, but I just import them into Excel. The problem with importing them into Excel and even Sheets is the size of what you're importing. There's a lot of fields that you don't need, that you're having to quickly edit out, and also the dropped zeros and all of that, which is part of is consistently raised as an issue in my mailbox of people going, when I open this CSV file, it drops all the zeros, and it's like, yeah, because you need to go and make this one change in how you open it. But if that is a problem that's a problem that everyone's having because of the nature of CSV files, can we produce something that's a little bit easier for people? Because having to explain how to open a CSV file in Excel thousands of times to thousands of people is not the most effective use of this, and is there a better way of giving that reporting and getting people to be able to see that? Elise doesn't have that problem because you don't start with a 0. It's the first, it's all of the local authorities where their NaPTAN numbers start with a 0. They end up being read as a number if they're not alphanumeric, and Excel and Sheets as well, if you don't tell them right, go in and drop that leading 0, which just creates all sorts of problems when you're trying to do analysis and manage things. So that's kind of where we're at with data quality. And even later is looking into the gazetteer. What was the gazetteer designed to do? What is it used for? There's how can I put this? When you all had the ability to edit things within the gazetteer, you all did it completely differently. So the center of a locality isn't about people have put them inconsistently in many different places. Are they in the population center? Are they where you would desire to go if you're traveling to that locality? Or are they in the geographic center of that locality? And everyone's done it very differently. So there are some localities that I know that I will be directed into the middle of a field because that is the center, that is the geographic center of that locality, rather than the population center, or actually the place where I would want to go if I put in that locality. So there's some real problems with the gazetteer that I want to kind of understand and address and have a look at. Is this the right gazetteer? Should we use the Ordnance Survey gazetteer? Is running our own gazetteer efficient and effective? What needs to happen to our gazetteer to make it exactly what we desired it to be, that lovely layered up and down across the country? Because at the moment it jumps in a number of places. There's missing layers for most of the country because they don't dive down. They will suddenly go down to a town or a suburb because there's no parents and grandparents put in, because we didn't enforce that when people created new localities. So there's a whole pile of orphaned localities everywhere that don't have that layering, that actually make it really hard for journey planners to use the gazetteer, because there's quite a few localities that don't fit into the gazetteer structure. And there are also places that are not the names. So what do we want to include in a gazetteer? Where is this town? Where is a suburb? How do you do all this stuff? This is all much later than now questions.
So I think that's an interesting challenge. If you go, the gazetteer is even later, because some of the earlier things about town references, for example, in a stop name, are inherently, or were inherently, linked to gazetteer entries.
Yes.
They're clearly not now, but they were to start with. And so for my mind, that I'm not sure mentally I can separate the two. If you want consistency and a hierarchy to be able to do it properly.
But I think part of it is what was intended and what has been applied by 148
Yep.
plus local authorities are quite separated. And the gazetteer is a big thing to tackle for data quality that I don't have the resources to tackle currently. The town suburb crossing landmark craziness is something that I can research and look at now and go, is this useful? Is this not? Or we can actually just leave those alone and focus on removing default wait time and timing status, because they don't make sense because they're route dependent. So why hold them in NaPTAN? And that then resolves a little bit of some of the data cleaning up problems, and just allows people to get a cleaner feed out of NaPTAN. So one of the things I'm aware of is people like Elise and pretty much anyone using software will not be able to change what they put in, but it's telling them these fields, don't put your time into them because these fields are not consistently applied across the country. And these are the ones to put your time into. So that's what I'm also trying to do, is to help people focus on the right places so we don't end up with, and I'm going to call it the landmark problem, where some people put a lot of time into landmark only to have their hearts broken when we found out on a public call that no journey planner was even picking it up, because while they were doing it really well in their local authority, nobody in the area was, and it's so inconsistently applied across the country that it's not something that a journey planner could pick up and use in a programmatic way. And this is some of what I'm just trying to tease out to help the local authorities put their efforts into the right places. Does that make sense, Tim?
Oh, absolutely it does. I just think that when you're looking at town and suburb, for example, which are important from a gazetteer point of view, if we're going to have a gazetteer, you end up prejudging the outcome of the gazetteer discussions, because if you go, we want suburb consistently, well, how do you enforce that? You go, actually, we're going to have a gazetteer, and you're only going to be allowed an entry in suburb if it's in the gazetteer.
But here's the thing: town and suburb aren't matching the gazetteer. They're not consistently applied, and they're free text. They're free text fields. So it's kind of going. It's kind of going. Do I ask Elise to put effort into putting in town and suburb, or do I say to Elise, your efforts better put into looking at the gazetteer and making the gazetteer, your gazetteer entries better? And this is kind of what I'm trying to explore.
Yeah, it's an interesting circle that you almost have to conclude before you can go, you need to put this, or you can ignore it.
Yeah. Elise?
Yes, I was just about to come in and say, we, as a rule of thumb, we are actually putting town and suburb in.
And how are you defining the difference between a town and a suburb? Because this also came up as to what's a town and what's a suburb. When does a suburb become a town?
Yeah, so the way that I'm using it is the town is defined by postal, and the suburb is what precedes the town. So, for example, where I am, where I actually physically live at the moment, now, my town is Kettering. I actually live in a small town. It's not defined as a village, it is actually a suburb, it is actually a town, but for postal reasons, the address is postal town is Kettering, but I actually live in Desborough. So the suburb is Desborough, but the town is Kettering. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. So, e.g., and it was Desborough.
So I live in, so the suburb is Desborough, but the postal town is Kettering. So yeah.
Yeah, I've just put that up on the.
There isn't, so if there isn't, if it is, so if you're living in the centre of Kettering, there will be no suburb. It would just be Kettering.
Yeah, and so one of the things is that's a really good way of defining it and making it clear. That's also part of the thing is there's been and you're 148 of, you're one of 148 ways of having applied this, and it's trying to get all of the local authorities to agree on kind of a principles here or a way of thinking about it, so that when, as a data consumer, I try to use that data, I'm very, very aware of what is there and what isn't. Otherwise, I'm going to end up kind of a little bit lost in what actually a town and a suburb is, because in other places, I think they've been almost the other way round. So a town is almost a village, a small town that's separated from a larger space, and suburbs are what makes up the larger space. That appears, and when you get into very, very rural places, it's like, is it big enough? Is this village big enough to call a town? Or is it this collection of villages? And then we get into some of the locality fun from the Gazetteer, which is we've gone down to parishes up in parts of Scotland, which are almost too small because a small village will be split into two parishes, whereas in fact it should only be one parish. And there's weird little things that we need to understand where all the problems are and look at solutions.
Which is why because this is something that Royal Mail have had to deal with a lot over their 100, 200 years or whatever it is that they've been in existence. That's why it made sense to use theirs, because they've already got it off to a T. They've had to, in order to be able to deliver mail to the right locations. So therefore, using Royal Mail's example that is already set out and is used by every single organisation throughout the land as how to actually define what is a specific type of locality, made sense to go down that route. Why reinvent the wheel when it's already there, fully operational, fully usable?
Oh, totally makes sense, because the other one that I've been pointed to is the Ordnance Survey version, which is also available in multiple different layers and layering. But the Royal Mail one,
the Royal Mail one, because they use it all the time.
Yeah, and it also makes sense because it says knowing somebody's address, you often know their postal address.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really good. This is why this is in later being researched. This is not stuff that I'm firm on or I'm firm on doing. It's more, this is where I'm prodding and poking and looking at the moment around the notions of data quality. And when I'm talking data quality, I'm looking across the country for consistency, completeness, and accuracy. So is it consistently filled out across a lot across the local authorities? Is it complete in the way that it's filled out, or is it only partial? And is it accurate? Are people putting in just placeholders, which we know there's a lot of dots and dashes and slashes and things that are being put in as placeholders, or just NA, or NA gets a lot of stuff, or is it actually being filled out accurately? And it's understanding, using those three as kind of the balance for data quality, and using those three measures to kind of look at each field across all of the local authorities and understand what's going on. Explore the license. We need to. Was that BB who put that on, or is that?
No, that was me, because Royal Mail PAF is licensed, and I know that government were trying to do something with licensing a couple of years ago, and I'm not sure the outcome of it. Likewise, the Royal Mail Gazetteers, they're licensed, and so it's just making sure we don't fall foul of. They're the obvious things to be having a look at, but we don't want to later down the line.
Licensing, trust me, licensing is something that I'm very aware that I need to keep on top of. We've got like 45 minutes left, and I feel like we've kind of got almost to the end of this. What I can do is I can also talk about rail replacement buses, which I think Tim will be quite interested in kind of where we are and what we've got planned.
Yeah. He says with a pained.
Is that fine for you, Elise? Because I don't want to start talking about something and you just basically go unconscious from boredom because we're not talking about anything that you need to talk about.
No, that's absolutely fine, because I deal with rail within the county anyway, and I've got a meeting with our TOC next month to talk all things buses, so it would be quite useful.
Just bear with me. We've gone through this again, and you can see that I have the NaPTAN. I love the way that I have the NaPTAN image in the background. Let me just see if I can make this. You're telling me that I've got this. There we are. I want to just grab a mural. Okay, so this is a sketch. We're still very, very early on what we're doing with this. And this has come out of a number of the discussions that we've had. So I'm still working this through. There's some pieces I need to build out a full service design for this and take it to the talks. So, but this is what we're planning, because we've got quite a tight time frame to get something in people's hands. We've got till August to get something in people's hands that gives them a sense of rail replacement buses. So what we're doing is the train infrastructure. This is all on the 910 ATCO code. So this is that centrally managed ATCO code just for rail. We're auditing what currently exists to make sure that we have the right amount of rail stations and that they're in the right places. I will ignore platforms. We are going to add platforms, but we'll ignore them for now. And we need the platforms in so that we can link the accessibility work across and into NaPTAN. We're just going to ignore that for now. We're going to add in rail replacement bus stops as an addition to the schema. Tim, you and I are probably going to have some great discussions around what formal things we need to do around this, but effectively we are just adding rail replacement RRB as a new stop type within the rail structure. And one of the other things is, and this links to accessibility as well, rail station entrances are a complete mess. Some people have them in really well, some people don't. We've got a number of rail stations that have no rail station entrances because people just haven't put them in. We've also got a number of stations that have multiple rail station entrances but only have one in NaPTAN. And we need the multiples because a lot of the ones that are missing are the accessible entrances, are the wheelchair, the ramp entrances, etc. So because we can get that information from the data sets that we're pulling down, one of the things that I'm proposing is that we pull the rail station entrances into the 910 data set and leave them alone, because again, when I asked people to define what a rail station entrance was, there was a number of different, even within the 4 or 5 people on the call, there were a number of different opinions of what counted as a rail station entrance, and where it should be. And it's just like, let's pull it in and use the National Rail and actually make sure that we've got the rail station entrances where they actually are. And when National Rail moves a rail station entrance, we know how should be able to pick it up and move it. So what we are doing for rail replacement buses is, first off, we need to create a slightly better rail data set within NaPTAN, because we need to have it coming from, if we have it coming from National Rail, we know when a rail station comes in because National Rail starts publishing it on their National Rail API and their website within a couple of months of tickets being able to be bought. The moment that they know exactly when it's going to come online, they start publishing about it, so we know about it, so we don't have the problem of us finding out about a rail station the day that it goes live, or often months after it's gone live, that people ask why we don't have it. So by using the National Rail API to grab our list of stations, this means that we get a list of all the in-use stations. Now, the more perceptive of you will note that this brings in a rule that means only live on National Rail site equals 910 and all other stops are 940. So this will help us clarify what is a 910 stop, which is rail, and what is a 940 light rail and metro, and it's about the presence on that National Rail site, because it has been up to somebody like me to make that decision over and over and over, and the different people who were fulfilling my role of editing the central stops have made different calls all the way across the years, and there's no rhyme nor reason behind them. There are some stops that are 940 that should be 910 and vice versa. So we're like, this just cleans it up. We then use the CRS from this to link to Darwin to get the tip block and Eastings Northings and other information about that stop. It's the only way we can find of getting, here is a station that is live and here is the rest of its information, is to join those two data sets together. The National Rail data feed doesn't have all of the information. Darwin on its own doesn't give the station and the station liveness. It also contains a lot more information than we need, and this way we identify just the ones that we need to look at. We don't end up looking at freight junctions and other things within the rail infrastructure. And then we take that information and we create a table within our data set, and then from that table we produce a NaPTAN XML that we can then publish. So that is more a mechanical part that we're doing on our side that stops me having to edit 2,500 an XML with 2,500. It also means that manual editing is pretty much removed. It becomes very much it is time to publish a new data set, rather than it is time you need to go and try to figure out how to add in this stop. It just allows us to figure that out. For that is one piece that we're working on. For the MVP for rail replacement buses, what we're looking at is creating a rail replacement bus entry that is centered in the same place as the rail station entry, that has a radius of 200 meters or so, which means, and we know from looking through quite a number of the rail replacement information, that will get most of the rail replacement bus stops will be within that radius. Now, this is an MVP. This is just to set out the data structure so that the innovation team and everyone can start to understand how rail replacement buses information might be used and how they might get it. Because instead of having that tight circle that you use for your systems, you can have a much wider circle. We can get those all in. The first release is to remove the rail replacement bus stops where we know they cannot exist. So, for example, Tim, the stop that you talked about that's 2 miles from the nearest tarmac, that doesn't have a rail replacement. There's also one in the middle of the Norfolk Fens that doesn't have a rail replacement. We will go, there's about 20 of them, I think, across the country. It's a very small percentage. We can go.
That many? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can go and find them and just take them out of the data. So they're a very easy edge case for us to find, and they're a very easy edge case for us to just take out of the data. And then we've got a number of things which will enable us to clean up that MVP and get it into the right places. So if a rail replacement is beyond 200 meters, we will add it at the correct location and advise that, hey, this one's now a 20 metre rather than a 200 metre radius, because we've put the rail replacement bus stop in the right place. Sometimes they're more than 200 metres away from the station. If there's two or more.
Come back to that 200 metres, that immediately triggers a load of alarm bells, just because for bus, that's a very long way and will cause all sorts of problems for tracking systems and things like that. Now, whether that does for rail replacement or not, I don't know. But when we talk rail replacement, we're just talking heavy rail, or are we looking at a solution that might migrate for light rail replacement and metro replacement and things?
Yes. But by the time we get to light rail and metro replacement, we will know a lot more we will have done a lot more work with the people with their systems as to how to download this and how to use it, how best it's used. And also, honestly, unless it's even London's going to be the biggest one for the light rail replacements. But for a lot of the smaller ones, for example, the Blackpool trams, if they do replacement buses, there's only 50 or 60 stops to manage, and we can do that in a small batch rather than trying to do 2,500. I can't do 2,500 stops easily. So what I'm trying to do is create something that works enough that somebody on a coach, because most rail replacement buses are coaches, can turn up and go, you are about to arrive at, or you have arrived at rail station, and that's what needs to be announced. Because if we make it within 20 meters, it's going to try to drive into the rail station. We can't get the location of the rail replacement stop close enough in this first pass. So let's look at it being quite big, of saying, hey, if you're within 200 meters of this point, yell out. And we do have a plan to get that down to exactly where the rail replacement stops are, but we are aware that we have quite a lot of stops to find and put in the right places, and we've got a plan of working our way through them. In the meantime, here is a solution enough that you can start building the software, building the systems, the on the bus systems, or the on the coach systems, so that you can use this. You can use this information, and we will make the data more complete over the coming months/years as we get this information in. So the first one is beyond 200 meters, we add it to the correct point. Now, these are all up for grabs as to which one goes next. If there's 2 or more rail replacement buses at the station, we put them in the correct locations. These are all things that we can find from the National Rail information. But every single train operator talks about the rail replacement at that train station differently in different languages, using different location mechanisms. Some of them use what 3 words, some of them just give a thing of in car park A has been one of them. So it's just like, okay, there's a wide variety of even the leveling of information that we're getting. So we're just going to do a solution and then refine it across those 2,500 or so stops. I think it's 2,600 rail stations. Just start to refine them down using these different use cases to find the ones that are important. For example, Leeds and York, it's probably really, really important to know which of the many rail replacement bus stops you need to be heading to. So actually putting them in the right places is great, because they're big stations to do. Tooting, I think Tooting, when it does rail replacement, it's basically use the bus stops that are outside the station. So one of the things that we're going to do is to make it easier for people who need to consume this information, rather than saying for this stop you need to go and download all of London and hunt for this ATCO code. We're just going to put the rail replacement stop on top of the stop where it should be, and then if that stop is moved, we'll move the rail replacement along with it. So it becomes a data shadow on top of the other stop, so that it simplifies for somebody using the rail replacement set, that they get it from one place and it contains all of those stops. They're not having to download 400,000 stops to try to find the 3 that they're after for their journey, because most of these are going to be for 3 or 4 stops. They're not going to be, even if you're rail replacing an entire longer journey, you're only going 3 or 4 stops at a time, or you're not doing 10,000 stops or something like that. So that was the using existing bus stops. And then I've said, plus many other edge cases, because everything is an edge case. It's great. Like London Turnpike Lane is the rail replacement bus stop for King's Cross. London Newbury Park is the rail replacement bus for Liverpool Street. So it's kind of like, okay, how do we do these ones that are consistently many miles away from where they are, but that's where it's easiest to bring the coaches in, to drop people off and put them into the rest of TfL's transport, and so that they get onto their onwards journey in the smoothest way possible, rather than having hundreds of coaches trying to get around in central London into King's Cross, which would be insane. The final iteration, heavens only knows when we'll get there, is all actual rail replacement bus stops at the correct location within this one data set that's contained within the 910 data set. So every rail station, as it comes online, we will create a rail replacement bus stop with it. And then as we know more about the rail replacement bus situation at that stop, we'll be able to refine where it goes. Now, some of this will be automated, some of it will be hand cranked and manual, and we'll look at what hand cranking we can turn into an automated solution. So 2050 me is not having to try to figure out where to put a rail replacement bus stop. We're getting the information from National Rail, and it's just cascading on through into NaPTAN in a nice consistent way that then cascades into the system that people are using for doing the announcements and en route information. Tim, you're giving me nods. I've found a solution. I know this problem came up, what is it, almost a year ago?
Yeah.
Less than a year ago? Yeah. And I have been one of the reasons for doing this MVP with the big radius is it lets us hand crank something out and get something into people's hands, into the hands of the TOC and the coach operators who are doing the planned rail replacement. So we're focusing this on planned rail replacement now. We'll do unplanned, and we'll figure out how we help manage unplanned later, but getting the planned ones in at least will enable everyone to kind of have that conversation. Elise, if you would like me to come and talk to your TOC people about this, send me some times and dates, and I will see how they match up with my schedule, and I will come and talk about what we're planning and get their feedback.
Okay.
This is kind of, so what we're also doing is we're going to effectively hand crank a lot of this to get an MVP out, to get something into people's hands while we sort out how to put this into production, because there's some really big cleanups that also need to happen. For example, we have 21 rail stations that are missing. People tell me there's 16, and I'm like, no, there's 21, because that is the difference between us and National Rail. On the date that we did the audit, I'm sure there's a couple more that are coming online. We've got 2,000 something that match, which is brilliant. We've got a whole pile where we need to fix the name, where the naming across National Rail, the Rail Directorate audit, and NaPTAN is different. Often they're subtly different, but that's slightly different as to whether they've got Lancashire or not put on, how well it's spelt. There's some spelling corrections, whether we use and or ampersand. These are all things that BB, me, and Carla are going to go and ask for policy people to give us a call on. But there are some that we just need to fix where the name is spelt wrong. And then we've got 160 to remove. The 160 to remove, some of them are stops that we're going to do them in different tranches. Some of them are train stations that have the word closed, and we've definitely closed them. Then they're not train stations anymore. Some of them are artifacts from not having platforms, and this is why platforms was important. So they might be in there for a while. For example, Clapham Junction, because it doesn't have platforms or rail station entrances done correctly, has 5 Clapham Junctions. There are 5 records for Clapham Junction within NaPTAN. If we put in platforms for Clapham Junction and rail station entrances for Clapham Junction, we can in fact kill 4 of them, because we'll put them all into one Clapham Junction, which will in fact make it easier to plan journeys to and from Clapham Junction, especially if the journey planner is trying to use NaPTAN data, because Clapham Junction is not an easy station to navigate around anyway. It's got 21 platforms. I'm going to say that. I know that it's got an overwhelming number of platforms and multiple entrances that take you to quite different places. Stratford is very much the same. Some of these big ones in London are the ones that we're going to tackle because they have multiple entries when they shouldn't. We understand that in the past this was a way of solving some of the problems of not having platforms, but we're going to solve that by putting in platforms, because that makes a lot more sense, and resolves a lot of the problems. King's Cross St Pancras is similar. It's got multiple. There's London King's Cross, there's St Pancras Station, there's London St Pancras Station. trust me, there's more than the 2 records there should be for King's Cross St Pancras for the rail parts, because they are 2 separate stations. But people have put in multiple rail stations for them because they've tried to account for the different platforms. And it's like platform A and B is the Thameslink platforms, which are put in as under a different name. And it's just like, okay, we just need to clean these out and make it so that there's the 2 records that have the right number of platforms and the right number of entrances, which will just help reduce it down. The international one, Tim, you and I might need to have a discussion as to whether we keep Eurostar as a separate train station, or we keep it as their international platforms within the train station, because Eurostar will not be the only operator going channelling soon. And how do we manage that? And there's also a problem with Ashford as well, because there's Ashford and Ashford International, which are literally platforms at the same station, but some of them you need to pass through your Schengen
security
control and your security to get to, and some of them you don't. And how do we indicate that? These
Ashford
are things.
Ashford International is actually closed.
Also aware. Also know that it's also aware that we need to, even if it's so I need to get policy people talk to me about, is this closed, forever closed, or is this
they
closed,
will never say that, Dr. J, because it's that's high politics.
It is closed, as in it cannot have services stopping there, but it won't be closed indefinitely.
Yeah, that's the thing. Some of the closed ones are permanently closed because they've actually been demolished and things like that. But ones like that are high politics needs to come in.
And it's also
Ashford International is only closed because they refuse to stop there. So it's a political will rather than anything else.
And also being aware that there's the Eurostar competitor that comes in 2026, so trying to go and connect with them and understand where they're running to and from, and do we have those indicated clearly? Are they running from King's Cross St Pancras infrastructure, which is all Eurostar branded, or are they going to run from Ashford, or are they running from somewhere else and Schengening somewhere? All of these questions are up in the air for me, and I might need help just connecting in to understand where I put them. But this is all about cleaning this up. So that
I know people at Thales will be able to help sort that out, because actually the Eurostar bit of St Pancras isn't owned by St Pancras, it's owned by a different company, and they can do whatever they want. It just gets horrible, and they're a subsidiary of Thales now. So
it's owned by Eurostar.
Interesting. So previous lives.
It's set up as an independent thing, so it doesn't matter who the train operator is.
Previous life, and this wasn't why I said London to Amsterdam was my favourite train journey. Back in I can't remember. I think it's 2011. I worked for a company that was building when Eurostar were planning their new trains, we were responsible for building and doing the design for the portal, for the web portal for the onboard experience. And I spent a lot of time at the Eurostar station terminal talking to people who were journeying, asking them what they thought of different designs. We did a whole pile of just kind of wandering up to people, and it's called guerrilla user testing. Essentially, you grab people who are about to undergo a journey and just go, okay, if you're on a brand new Eurostar, and you wanted a menu and you wanted to see what was available in the cafe, what would you expect to see? And we'd show them various experiences on paper and get them to give their feedback on it. And it was a very, very good way of testing. And so I was working with the people with the Eurostar people at the time, trying to get access to the terminal, even because we all had to go through security to get in. Yeah, yeah, rail side, airside, which is also known as rail side. Yeah. So where are we? So that, what have I covered? Have I covered everything I expected to cover? If I go to here, is that going to bring up? Okay, so we have covered. We've got 20 minutes left, but there's part of me going, have we covered everything? So we've gone through data quality, why now, next, later, and even later. We've talked a lot about the 999 stops, the non-passenger stops, and the three current NaPTAN data quality issues, ones that we know just don't use because they're there. What we will do is look at suppressing them. We can always unsuppress something. We're not removing them completely. We're just going to suppress them in the output as kind of the very late part of this, of telling people to ignore it and don't try to use it. And then we will just suppress the values in the output, the same as we do with the notes field, to prevent publication of PII information. And then the next one is that stricter text validation. And then, what's being researched is a bit of a mess. There's that interaction between the gazetteer and other gazetteers and how we'll put that in. I might take the easy step and just go default wait time and timing status are the next two that I focus on, just saying, hey, we can suppress, these are not used. You might need to fill them out because some software will make them compulsory, some software won't. And we can just suppress, start to ignore and suppress those in later versions. And the bus stop type, it was interesting that people wanted more information. I think and Tim, this is a lot around hail and ride and flexible and around how they're put together, and ensuring that people get it to make sense. Because I don't. Yeah. There's also I'm going to stop sharing. For those who don't know, there's also something called NaPTAN discovery schema, which has never had anything published in it, but it's sitting there. It's also something that I don't know what its purpose was, and Tim, this is probably a very deep conversation for you and me at some point, and we need to catch up to have a look at, is this something that we should even be publishing the schemas for, or should we just completely say, look, hey, this thing was a great idea back in the early 2000s, it's not being used, it's not implemented, and we're just going to quietly withdraw it from what we put out, so that you're not having to link to something that doesn't really work.
Well, if you've not got a service running behind NaPTAN discovery, then it's pointless. Because the whole point was you could ask, what are the stops in Sheffield, and it would bring back a list of stops in Sheffield. So you could do a gazetteer lookup from.
We never. So interestingly, we've never had. As far as I could tell, we never had anything that matched that schema published to us. We never had anyone using that schema. Now, I see. I know
the Olympic Journey Planner that Transport Direct did use that schema, but I think that's probably the only implementation that's been there of it.
And that was in 20.
Well, that was for 2012, and so Transport Direct Journey Planner got shut down 2014, 2013. So not for a long time. And it goes to the whole gazetteer debate, really.
Yeah. And it's and I think there's, and this is me thinking out loud, one of the next ones, not the next public meeting, which I can't remember what it's about, but in 2 or 3 months, I might do something about the gazetteer, and Tim, you and I can work together with BB, and the three of us can run a collaborative session, 2 collaborative sessions, talk about from your point of view, what was the goal of the Gazetteer when it was created? And I can talk about what the Gazetteer, how far or close the Gazetteer is to its original goal.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about where do we desire to be? What do we try to do? Do we try and fix it? Do we go to another one? What is the thoughts of the ecosystem on the Gazetteer? And then we can kind of go, okay, here's some ideas of, here's something I can take to BB and the SRO board and the policy people going, this is something that we need to fix, or this is fixes that we can push back onto local authorities. We'll give them the mechanisms, or how do we resolve this? Because I also know at the moment that editing the Gazetteer falls on me. I've also got the lovely Carla, who is working incredibly hard to manage to corral the mailbox and myself into tranches of work. We got a ton of updates from one local authority for their NPTG. So they ran to the top because there was like 30 or 40 localities that needed to be changed. We went through and did some checking of the information they'd given us. We managed to do one in an hour because we needed to go back and request a lot more information from them. And this was just helping Carla and myself do the analysis and work through what was being requested and what was being assumed, because there was a lot of stuff, even in the old request forms, that was assuming stuff. It wasn't asking for parents and grandparents. It wasn't asking for that layering of information. It was assuming every NPTG entry was an isolated entry. And it's little things like that would just by working through that first one, we're now able to go back and ask better questions. And when I get a break from the tsunami of public meetings that I'm in at the moment, because I'm also at a conference next week and I've got another public meeting with Tim, we'll come up with a bit more of an update to NPTG, and Carla will have gone in, because Carla's now going off and chasing anyone who's asking for NPTG updates for all of these bits and pieces of information to fill out a spreadsheet so her and I can go through and just physically make all the changes, and try to do them right first time. The number of times I have to upload is, and I feel everyone's pain on the uploads and that, because I'm also having to edit by hand. The number of little mistakes that I make is quite legion, and we're getting better, and we're getting better at finding the mistakes before we put it into try and upload it. But yeah, every day we look at what's been uploaded and we see where it's red, where it's gone wrong, and there's always me with NPTG, and there'll be like 5 or 6 reds, and suddenly it goes green. It's like, yes, I finally found a comma or a missing something, or there was a space in the wrong place, or I hadn't.
Why you're not cut out to be a programmer?
It is not my core. It is not my core skill. My core skill is analysis. My core skill is being able to see the patterns in this and go, hey, these are the patterns that are going wrong. How do we solve them? And ask the questions and build the conversation. Yeah, detail.
Yeah.
Detail, not my bag.
I spent 6 hours last week before I worked when I was trying to update the NetX schema for an update for saying why it wouldn't validate, and it was because the person that had sent me the stuff is Danish, and the character code for a semicolon is different, but absolutely everything displays it the same on a user interface. And so I just got to the point where I retyped it all by hand, and yeah.
Absolutely.
That's why I'm balding.
Tearing hair. Oh no, I totally get you. We spent because we see this every day, and I'll show you. We see the support. I'll share the support screen. So we see this screen. We check this every day. We check for what's been uploaded and things going through. When there's a red, we can go and see what was going wrong. This one, So that's me struggling with MPTG. It only took me 2 goes. This one, it came up with this has validation errors. What it was is there's 2 identical characters or semi-identical characters. One is a single dit and the other one is a backspace dit.
Yeah.
Yep. I love the way everyone understood what I said. It's a single quotey and the backspacey quotey, and they'd use the backspacey quotey rather than the single quotey, and you literally couldn't see the difference on any, even in the XML, you couldn't see the difference in plain text everywhere because it was always displaying the same.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I got one of the developer who was on support that day, Terwin, and I went through, and on one of, he used a slightly different program to me, and it brought up the ANSI version of the character, and he went, "Here's your problem," and it took the 2 of us about 3 hours to find the problem with this file, and this is why free text validation is really important, because it can tell the difference between those 2 characters very, very easily. And it's also plain text is not plain text. There's a very, very good YouTube, I'll try to find it and send it around, a very good YouTube video about plain text and how plain text is not plain text and all the different codings. And it's actually from a hacker who was talking about, he was trying to solve a problem within it was at a hacking forum, and he was talking about trying to solve a problem, and plain text is not plain text, and all the different versions of plain text that created so many problems for password checkers, because it was saying your password needs to have these types of characters, but if it was translating that character to something from how you typed it into somewhere else, it would mean that your password would just go. The interesting things that I watch in the evenings. Is there anything else that we need to cover, Elise and Tim and BB?
Not that I can think of.
Yeah, nothing from me as well, Jay. Thanks.
Then I'm going to turn off the recording and end it there. Record and transcribe, stop recording. There we go. Stop.